Hi everyone, Carol and Kristen here to say, shut the door. And you might be thinking, shut the door, what are you talking about? And actually this is our response to the shootings in Texas, the school shooting that has been heavy on everyone's hearts and that we've all been praying so deliberately to God for these children and their teachers who lost their lives so senselessly, just horrible. But we saw a post the other day on Facebook and we thought it was so spot on for the situation. Thought we would just read it to you. It's by Michelle Davidson, and she said, "The door where the shooter entered the school was propped open, not knowing what was about to happen. The shooter was given access to the kids and adults on that campus. The policemen were there but waiting to go in. As I have pondered and talked with God over these things the last few days, I felt so overwhelming in my spirit. This is a physical picture of what is happening in the spiritual. Today, we have left doors propped open by which the enemy has gained access to our children. Access to fill their minds with anxiety, fear, lies, hate, lust, pornography, and pride. I think in some cases we have even given him a key to come and go as he wishes. When we are not present and intentional in parenting, the enemy is more than happy to fill in the gaps through social media, screens, porn, drugs, evil, insecurity, depression, and anxiety. Parenting is not for the lazy or faint of heart these days. It's difficult in different ways, but ways that I believe come with a much greater cost. We, I'm including me as well, have sat back and prayed, asking God, when will things change? We have waited for more reinforcements, for someone else to help our kids, or thinking it's a phase, it will pass. Meanwhile, the enemy is taking out our children one by one. Satan has come to kill, steal, and destroy, period. He is killing their God-given identity. He is stealing their beauty and purpose. He is destroying their childhood and joy. He is stealing their confidence and peace. We can't just sit by any longer. We have to rise up and stand for and with our kids. We have to put down our own devices and play with our kids. We need to look into their eyes and speak truth into their hearts. We need to shut and lock the door where the enemy has gained access. It's a spiritual battle, folks. It's time we take back some ground that the enemy has stolen. And that's only going to happen when we, as adults, be adults for the kids in our lives. Let's parent and grandparent so kids can be kids. You can do this. God is for you, and so am I. And we just saw that recently, like I said, Michelle Davidson, and just thought, wow. Is that not so spot on with what's going on in our world? It is an evil problem. It is a sin problem. Mm-hmm. And it's complicated. There are obviously a myriad of factors. But one main factor is that we need to be present to our children. We need to be teaching them and protecting them. There is so much out there at the click of a button. We talk about the power of social media can be so great and have such a phenomenal ripple. And it can also have such a negative ripple. And especially at young ages where kids are experiencing cyberbullying, which then, internalizes all sorts of hatred and they see very violent things online. And so many games that kids are playing are so violent. Look at the TV shows and movies and just the increasing violence, horrible language, pornography. It's just rampant. And this is what happens. When people cease to be people, we don't have any problem taking their lives. And so we just felt like this woman, Michelle, just so spot on articulated what we need to do, which is we need to really, as parents, as a society, we need to rise up and truly parent and protect and be present to our children. And that's going to take some serious work on our parts, but we have some ideas for how you might do that. Mom, do you want to share an idea that you have?
Well, just listening to that again, Michelle did a fabulous job of just opening the door wide open to what the real deal is here.
About what we need to shut the door on.
We need to shut the door on, right. And, one of the things that she said was, speak truth into their hearts, into your children's hearts, and your grandchildren, and your neighborhood children, and your relatives, the children. There are children at your church, there are children at your schools, there are children everywhere. And even if you don't have children or grandchildren, or they're not close by, it doesn't mean that you don't have access to children and that you can't affect children for good. Even just volunteering, for a vacation Bible school or at your local library to read good, wholesome, virtuous material to children. Many schools have programs where adults go in and read to the children or help them to learn to read. And just the influence that, that one-on-one that you can have, that, I can remember individual people who took special pains and were very intentional about saying something to me personally, a one-on-one. Right now, what's coming to my head is what a friend of ours said to you on your first communion day.
Yeah, I wondered those that say.
Well, yeah. that just popped into my head right now. But here you are. This is over 2 decades later, and you still remember that moment in history on your first communion day when this neighborhood friend and family friend spoke truth into your heart.
He took me aside and he just said, I want you, before you go to bed tonight, before you take off your beautiful dress and everything else, I want you to go stand in front of a mirror, and I want you to try to memorize every moment of this day. This is where you receive Jesus for the first time in the closest way that you ever can on this earth. And he said, so I want you to try to kind of burn this into your memory, how this felt, what you were wearing, the people who were around you to celebrate, how you felt so close to Jesus. These are moments that we really want to remember. And so he, like Mom said on my first communion, took me aside and just said, before you go to bed tonight, I want you to stand in front of a mirror and I want you to try to just create kind of a time capsule of this day for yourself.
And you know what? There's an idea. Okay, so there's just one idea of how you could go about speaking truth into the hearts of young people. And what's to keep all of us from saying that to the children in our own lives, not just on their first communion day, but every day. I want you to remember this moment. I've kind of gone back to recently saying in front of my family or thinking in my own head, right now is the happiest moment of my life. And I copied it. I stole the idea from the wife of Frank Gilbreth, who was the pioneer of time management. And he was he's the fellow who the whole Cheaper by the Dozen book and movie were written about. And he was a real person and he was into time management. And his wife, when the family would gather together, she would always say, right now is the happiest moment of my life. And what is to keep you at any moment of your life where you're in the midst of children to be able to say to them, I want you to remember this moment, this happy moment, this moment where we are immersed in God's nature, or maybe at this moment where we are enjoying a meal together, or this moment where we are having some kind of fun, taking a walk, something it doesn't have to be anything spectacular. Sacramental moments are spectacular. And one of the things I guess is appropriate to bring up right now is that we receive special graces in those sacramental moments. And that sacramental grace is with us for a lifetime. So maybe you could say to your family and friends, if you're Catholic, you could say, you receive these special graces on your first communion day. Those graces are still with you. How are you living out that grace today? If you're not Catholic, you are still enjoying God's grace. And, you all also have all the special moments. And so just to be able to say, let's remember this moment. Let's do everything in our power to remember this moment and carry it forward. Just planting seeds of goodness and goodness and goodness and goodness, because you never know the ripple of those seeds that have been planted and the good that they will do. And those, in retrospect, we look back on the lives of many people who have participated in evil, And you would probably guess, and I think if there was a way to calculate, we would find out that many of these people didn't have good role models in their lives, and people who were seeking them out and planting seeds of goodness and grace inside their souls. So we all have the responsibility to carry on the mission of Christ every moment of every day, as much as we possibly can. So that's a thought.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to something else that she said was reclaiming childhood. And I think that that's so much a part of what you're saying too, is, letting kids be kids and having these, like you said, they could be seemingly mundane, but very special moments. I think sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves. It has to be Pinterest worthy or Instagram worthy and all of these things, but just really being present to your child is such an important and special thing. And it really helps them. And helping them to be present in another way, there is a movement going on right now. I just saw this recently it's called Wait Until 8th Grade. And it's about not giving your child a smartphone before 8th grade because it's trying to continue childhood and not having cyberbullying and the stresses that come with social media, and not only the stresses, but your child not getting outside. I mean, I also saw recently the doctors are starting to prescribe outdoor time because what is ailing us as a people is just we're not getting outside, we're not getting fresh air, we're not getting vitamin D from the sun. And so that's something that we as a family have really been starting to work on, is just we have a front porch swing, and just sitting out on that front porch swing and just being together as a family, not having our phones, and just soaking up the fresh air, the sunlight, God's greenery and nature and the birds, and just taking it in.
And taking in, one of the things that we didn't mention is the eye contact. I love this idea of the not giving your child a cell phone until they're 8th grade or longer even, because the eye contact that you just don't have it. And there are real ramifications to relationship issues down the road when you are unaccustomed to looking people in the eye and getting comfortable with faces and human beings. I mean, we're very connected to this object, this device, tangible device that is a piece of steel or whatever, plastic. And instead of looking at real human beings with real skin and real feelings and emotions and a soul and heart.
Well, and living in an alternate reality, we were talking about this before, where you're seeing people's highlight reel. And I think this comes back to some of the anxiety and depression that can come out of being so connected to social media. Yet again, we love social media for a lot of the great things that it brings about. But there's also, obviously, there's going to be pros and cons. Some of those negatives are you're seeing the highlight reel of people's lives. They're not showing you some of the dark, and some people do, but a lot of times you're seeing the best moments and the great lighting and angles and all of these things, instead of seeing a real person. And so in some ways we're kind of living in an alternate reality instead of living in reality, in the beautiful mess that is life. And so that's not good either, setting unrealistic expectations or thinking that everything has to be just so, or just the depression and anxiety it can bring about in our young people or in ourselves. And so that's another way to keep our young people in a good mental space, is to limit the amount of social media for them and for us.
Right. I love that idea.
Yeah,
I really do.
It's something we've really been trying to do. And, and whether that's, I follow someone who talked about how one day a week, she and her husband completely go tech free. I thought that's awesome. We have started with just trying to limit tech. We have not done like a total tech free day, but you could start at a certain time every night. We're totally shutting down tech. Or, like this woman does, an entire day, no tech. But, just to unplug and be present.
I was using the example with Kristen this morning that I was going to spend the night last night at the lake, but we don't have internet service there yet. It's not plugged in yet, and it's not going to be for a week. And I do a lot of work from that space. And I told her, no, I didn't want to do that because I didn't have access to my technology and my internet. I didn't have internet services. And then so I came home and I thought, how pathetic. How pathetic is that I cannot be in a space without internet services. So this morning, I like to challenge myself. And here's another thing that we can do. When you see something evil or something that's not virtuous or intrinsically not good, you can challenge yourself to do better. So this morning, even in my prayer time, which I like to do first thing in the morning, I will often go right to my phone and I will start doing all of my Catholic Christian apps. And I have a select 5 or 6 that I go to very regularly. And I said, no, I'm not doing that today. Today I'm doing meditation. So I spent about 10 minutes just repeating the word Abba to myself. And then I opened a book, and it was the book on the life of Saint Faustina Kowalska, the saint of mercy, of divine mercy. And oh my gosh, what I gained in the probably half hour that I spent reading this book about this saintly soul and all the messages of her decision making. Her decision, she was very much someone very human, very real, very tortured, dealt with all of the things that we deal with today on a different level. Didn't have the cell phone to worry about and all the media tech and all that, but still had
it's all relative.
Her own, it's all relative, had her own stuff. And I was just discerning and watching and listening as I read how she dealt with her issues. And I was very inspired. And so here I was, I decided to walk away from social media, from my cell phone that I cannot live without, except that I can. And, so I'm really proud of myself that I did like an hour, an hour away from all of that. And that's my challenge to you to do the same, because it will make a difference. So what else? Is there anything else we want to share about?
Yeah, I think, one other thing that we could share is, there is something called Covenant Eyes that helps to monitor what you're doing on the internet, if you're setting it up for your child, what your child's doing on the internet. And there's all sorts of safety features that you can put on for children to block certain content. And I would just encourage all of us to look into those. Make sure your settings are such that your children are not being bombarded with evil. It's really scary what they're being subjected to on TikTok and Snapchat and all of these things, these ads that come up, or these things in their feed, or, just what, certain people are posting that's really inappropriate, that we talk about now, that is truly like pornographic, except for our society has become so desensitized to us that we don't even see that as pornographic, except for it is.
Which is why I think when you see evil happening in the world, something that you can say to yourself, ask yourself some questions. What is this? Why is it happening? How did this come to be? Where did this come from? And so I tend to, when I hear about things like what happened in Texas, I get instantly angry. But the anger, has to be turned into something constructive, something holy and good. And so I asked myself, what was it about that young man's life that caused him to be so in the muck and mire of evil that he would do something that atrocious? And so when I start to break it down and say, why did this happen? How did this happen? What were the elements of his life that led him to be in such a, sad and sorrowful place that he felt compelled to do this? And so that's where the real work comes in, where we then try to turn things around for good. And we can do that.
It starts in our own homes.
It does, absolutely.
Not that if you see someone who's struggling, absolutely be reaching out and doing what you can. But, so many of the saints, Mother Teresa talked about it all the time. If you want to change the world, go home and love your family members.
Well, that's, one of the things that I always think about, and this actually came about in my prayer time this morning, is that in your own life, wherever there are peaceful situations, where I guess I would say that you can bring peace to your own peaceless situations, because we all have them in our lives and in our relationships. We have situations that arise that cause us angst and sorrow and anger and all kinds of negative things. And so the question becomes then, what can we do to turn that around? What can we do to change the course of that? And there's lots of things we can do. So we first of all, we turn to God and we ask him, can you please help me? Of course he can help you. but ask him to help you. He's a real gentleman. He waits to be asked and invited into your life. So you ask him to help you. And then you listen very carefully to his responses. Do you think you really think that he's not going to give you some kind of good food for thought? I assure you he will. Jeremiah 29:13, if you truly seek him, you shall surely find him, and he will surely answer you, and he will surely give you encouragement and motivation, and sometime he'll nudge, and he'll
And I think it's so important to pay attention to those nudges.
Absolutely.
Especially in a time such as this, when you can feel so angry and so powerless, and that you want to pray and act, but you don't know how to act. And I would just say, like Mom was saying, pray for these people, pray for their families. I saw a lot of things online about supporting the families by donating money to different causes that would help them, get them food, get them anything that they might need. Obviously those are great ways that we can act, to pray and act. But another thing would just be, when you pray, ask God to reveal to you what you can do in your own life, because I think so often we feel powerless and we don't really do anything.
And it's
or we
out
pray,
there,
but we
somewhere
don't really,
out there, but
or we just want to completely shut down.
Right.
And instead of shutting down, ask God to reveal to you, what is it in my own life that is contributing to the evil that's in society?
Exactly.
What can I do? Because we can. And that's the thing. Instead of feeling powerless, we can do things. And obviously prayer is the most powerful thing we can do, because prayer changes us. Prayer changes us.
Yes, it does.
And that's what needs to be changed, because this is a human problem. This is a sin problem. This is an evil problem. So we need to do the work.
And turn to God. John chapter 14 verse 21 talks about, it's where the whole song, Jesus Loves Me, This I Know. And I've just been, that song's just been in my mind. I sing it to my grandchildren. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible. And I love that song because I want to plant that into their little young hearts and minds, that God is still in control of the universe, of the world. He is still in control. And if we turn to him, he will turn things around, and he can turn things around. But we need to do our part. We need to be missionaries for his mission. And you know what? We've all got the power to do that. So we have lots of choices today. We have lots of time to think. They say that on average, the average person has about 6,200 thoughts a day. So how many of those thoughts are going to be for good instead of evil? How many of those thoughts are going to be for God? How many of those thoughts are going to be holy and sacred? How many of those thoughts are going to be peaceful and loving and kind and generous?
How can you create more peace in our world instead of violence? Maybe you need to clean up your mouth. Maybe that's where you need to shut the door. Maybe you need to stop engaging on social media so much because it's bringing about anxiety and depression within you, or maybe it's not making you as present to your kids. Where is it that Satan's got a foothold? Where has he shoved his foot cracked open in the door? We need to find those spots, and we need to shut the door. So know that we are praying about this situation. I hope that we're all praying together. I'm sure that we are. And know that we're all praying for you, that we can all pinpoint those places where we need to shut the door.